Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 64 of the Self-Publishing Roundtable, the podcast by indie authors for indie authors. I am your host, back from little liaison last week, Wade Finnegan, and my co-hosts this evening are Kevin Michael,
Hey!
and it's still light, you can see him a little bit.
That's not by design.
That's not by design. Carl Sinclair,
Hello there.
Carl in the house, and Trish McCallan.
Hey everyone.
And our very special guest this evening is Rachel Aaron. Now, you may, probably most of our watchers know Rachel from her little book called 2K to 10K, but she's also a very accomplished fantasy and science fiction author, which made Carl just about, blow a gasket. So we'll be talking about some of that stuff tonight from her traditional publishing and her self-publishing. Of course, we will get to the 2K, 10K stuff too, because I know a lot of people were jonesing about that. So, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So, Carl, since you are kind of a fanboy a little bit, I thought maybe we'd throw it to you first to start off some questions.
Hi, Rachel. Obviously, a lot of people do want to talk about your little book that could 2K to 10K, and I think a lot of people have read that in the self-publishing community. But I'm interested to kind of talk about your fiction a little bit as well. I read the first Eli Monpress book, and I thought the first line of that book was one of the best hooks that I'd read for a very, very long time. So I'm interested to kind of see how you got into writing fantasy, especially epic fantasy. It's obviously not as a bigger genre for female authors, so that's interesting to me how you got about writing those. And it's published with Orbit Books as well, so it was traditionally published. So maybe just let us know how you came to writing fantasy and how that series came about.
Yes, well, I've always been a giant fan of fantasy. I grew up in a very nerdy household. All we had was fantasy and science fiction and some mystery. That was pretty much the books that I just grew up on my whole life. And it never really occurred to me to write anything else. Like when I sat down to write, it was just, I'm going to write a fantasy. And I actually wrote another book before The Spirit Thief, which was my first published book. That was a 220,000 word YA fantasy. And you can see why that didn't fly. A little long for YA. And this was back in 2004, so there wasn't, the self-pub movement was nowhere near what it is today, and self-publishing wasn't even an option for me, or at least not an option I was willing to pursue at the time. So I wrote, and I had this idea kicking around in my head for this thief who wanted a bounty of 1,000,000 gold. And like that was the reason he did everything. Like that was why he stole stuff. He didn't even care about the things he was stealing. He just wanted to get a higher bounty so he could be famous. And that became The Legend of Eli Monpress, which is published through Orbit. And I went the entirely traditional route. I'm actually, it's kind of funny, I'm sort of like the stereotypical traditional author in that way. Like I wrote the book, I edited the book, I wrote query letters, I waited months and months and months and months, and I got like a request for more pages, and I sent that, and I waited months and months and months and months, and then they were like, we really like the book, but you have to rewrite the middle because it's stupid. Or it wasn't that, but it was boring, and it was. So I rewrote it over a week at the beach. Like everyone else was at the beach, and I was inside rewriting my novel. And I sent it to the agent, and I wait months and months and months and months. And then she's like, I love it. I'm sending it to my boss. And I'm like, okay. Because at this point, I kind of moved on and started writing other books. And then, like, one day I'm at work, just hanging out, and doing my job, and I get a phone call from the 212. And if you've ever been in querying, you know 212 is New York, and 212 area code. And I nearly have a heart attack. I hit the button and I missed the call because they didn't pick my phone up. And so I star 69 it, and I get like the building's answering service, and I like check my email, I check my voicemail, and I'm like freaking out. And it's my agent, and he's like, hey, Rachel, I really love your book, and I want to represent you. Call me back. And at that point, I think I really did have a heart attack. Like, the room started getting dark, and things started spinning. and I call him back like as fast as humanly possible. And I get his assistant, who is now actually my agent, on the phone. And she's like, "How you feeling, Rachel?" And I'm like, "I think I just had a heart attack." And they're like, "Don't have a heart attack. We want you to write more books." And that was how I got my agent. And it's pretty much like the Hollywood agent phone call, like what everyone hopes to get. And that was still the happiest day of my life, and including my marriage and the day my son was born. So sorry, family, but
Wow.
that was the happiest day of my life.
That's awesome.
And how many books in the Eli Mompress series?
There are 5 altogether. The once I got my agent, because the agent was by far the longest part of things. Once I got my agent, the books actually sold fairly quickly to Orbit, and I love my editor over at Orbit. Davy Pillai is amazing, and one of the funniest ladies ever. And she loved the book. She signed it. They bought all 3 books, but they kind of saved them up to release them like 1, 2, 3 in a month to drive sales. So I didn't actually have any books out for 2 years until after I signed with Orbit, which was kind of annoying, but it worked out okay. But after she read the 3rd book, and keep in mind at this point, none of the books have come out, she buys the next 2 books because she loved the 3rd book so much. And so I actually sold 5 books before a single book came out.
That's awesome.
Which is not the normal way of things. Very odd.
So much for the sophomore slump.
I just.
No, carry on. Sorry.
I was saying, I've always tried to. I like to think that authors get better with every single book, and I know that was true for me. Like I look back at The Spirit Thief, and I still like it, but I'm like, oh my god, I could have done all this stuff so much better. So. But I'm glad you like the first line. It's actually one of my favorite first lines I've ever written. So.
Yeah, well, I actually came across it. David W. Wright, who used to be a co-host on here, he co-hosts the self-publishing podcast. He doesn't read a lot of books because he's so busy writing. And one day he was like, "You got to read this line," and it was actually Dave who told me about it. And if anyone out there knows Dave, they know that he's not exactly the most excitable chap in the world, and he thought it was a really, really good line and thought I would like it and the book because he knew I liked fantasy. That's when I picked it up, and I just sat there for ages. Remember, I think I even talked about it on a show on SPRT a long time ago. I just thought it was a really, really good hook.
Okay, look, can we break in here a little bit and
Yeah.
ask someone to actually read that line? Because I'm sure
Yeah,
there's a ton of people on the website wanting to hear it.
Well,
I have a copy right here. Give me one
There
second.
you go. So why don't you go ahead and read that opening line?
if you're a fantasy fan, I just think the hook immediately made me want to read the next paragraph, which I think is really what any first line should do.
That's exactly what it needs to do.
So do you want to read it for us, Rachel?
Yeah.
I've probably talked it up heaps now, and
It's a
everyone's
very long first line, but I hope you like it.
I do.
In the prison under the castle Allays, in the dark, moldy cells, where the greatest criminals in Melanor spent the remainder of their lives counting rocks to stave off madness, Eli Mompress was trying to wake up a door. And it's sort of the what?
Yeah,
Sort of
that was my initial reaction. I guess the strength of first line should always be to ask a question of people and get them to want to read the next paragraph to find out what the hell it was about or what's going on.
Well,
And just a guy in this, dark and dangerous place that you've explained, and he's there waking up a door, doesn't even kind of make sense.
No.
Yeah, that's it.
That's sort of my entire... Oh, go ahead.
That's the entire hook right there. You're like, what? And so you have to read the next line to figure out, what he was actually doing. It's an
that's sort of
excellent hook.
one of my kind of theories of writing is that everything you write should make a person want to move forward. There should never be anything in your book that's a good place to put it down. You should never let go of your reader, because the moment you let them go, the chances that they'll finish go down, and you just have to hook and hook and hook and hook and hook, and it's not enough to hook them in the first paragraph or the first line. You got to just keep going. Everything has to be super interesting. So I just try to apply that.
Okay, so kind of going in that direction. I mean, there's some genres that the opening hook or the hook are kind of self-evident, like with suspense, with mysteries. It's pretty easy with those genres to actually hook and keep hooking just because the plot can hook. But fantasy is a lot different. So how do you go about hooking your fantasy audience, like the way you described?
Well, I think one of the biggest strengths of fantasy is that it's a very epic genre. Like, I write epic fantasy specifically, but my epic fantasy still reads very light and breezy. And it tends people either hate that it's like fun and light, or they really like it. And I personally really like fun, breezy fantasy novels. I don't like to be depressed. I like all the death. And but what I try to do in fantasy is that fantasy is a genre of interest. It's a genre of really how interesting is it? How beautiful is it? Can you describe this amazing world you've created? You don't have the suspense hooks of things in the real world that, like, you can have like the phone calls coming from inside the house, that kind of stuff. But you do have this incredibly beautiful, deep world that you can create and invite people to come into. And so if you're writing fantasy and you really want to hook your audience, I think you can't go wrong with some really killer drama and some really cool world building. Like, people will read has the tension, but in fantasy sometimes the beauty of the world is the tension and the what's
Yeah, I agree.
going on in this world.
The middle, like, 4 books in the Wheel of Time series were kind of boring. Like, the plot
Not a
never
lot happened.
progressed. Yeah, like, nothing happened for,
It was like
like,
a book. It was like
4,000
3 days.
pages. Yeah, 3 days over 4,000
Three
pages or
days
whatever it
over,
was.
yeah.
But yeah, but the world itself was why I kept reading. He just did an amazing. Robert
But
Jordan did such an amazing job of world building. His
well,
world and his
also,
societies, religions.
yeah, Robert Jordan also was a really good master of tension. If you read his books, there's always something ticking. Something is always ticking in the background, and there's always a sword hanging over someone. Something terrible is always going to happen kind of off in the distance. So even while these descriptions are going on, you always know of something bad's coming. Oh, that's important. There's this bad. He's kind of the master of slipping in the little hooks, and I think that's why his stuff was so popular, because you read it, you just can't help getting kind of pulled along because the stories are, while the stories are very long, and it's not like you're like, what the heck is going on? When is this ever going to end? They were still tense, which is kind of a miracle in hindsight.
So then, with your books, then you're hooking basically then on the world and the characters, and the questions to kind of bring your readers around.
Well, I would definitely say with my Eli Mompress books, which was, again, my first series, I was mostly hooking with the characters. All the characters in the Eli series are the show. They're what the series is really about. There's a big meta plot, and there's a big end of the world scenario, because this is epic fantasy. But primarily, it's the story of these three, yeah, well, four really, Eli and his two friends, and Miranda, who's the wizard chasing them. She's the cop to their robbers. And it's the story of their sort of capers in their lives and how they become better people and how they grow up. And that is the primary drive of the story. And in my newest book, Nice Dragons Finished Last, it's really the same kind of thing. It's a bunch of really funny, really interesting, likable people having an adventure. And there's all sorts of stuff going on, mystery, but mostly it's the story of people having an adventure, people you want to be friends with. Very character driven.
Yeah, I think the characters are kind of key to almost any genre.
I definitely, I couldn't name one where they weren't. So I've read plenty
Yeah.
of very good books that had terrible characters, and I was like, this book could have been so good if these people weren't so terrible.
Yeah,
Especially
you
when
don't
you
like.
have an anti-hero. You gotta watch out for those guys.
Yeah, I think Carl had a couple more questions. Did we lose you, Carl?
Yeah, sorry,
Oh.
my internet's playing up today. disconnected me. So you had the five books, and I think you said they put the first three out almost on top of each other. At what point did you sell your sci-fi books? Because you're traditionally published with some sci-fi as well under another pen name. I'm interested to find out why the change of name when you had obviously got the fantasy books and were starting to build a name for yourself.
This is where the kind of the ugly side of traditional publishing comes in. When I finished Fortune's Pawn, which is the first of my sci-fi series, which is written as Rachel Bach, I had just, I think the Spirit War, which is the fourth book of the series, had just come out, and Spirit's End was like about to come out. And at that point, my sales were actually very low. We had some bad covers in the first three books, and the whole series got redone, and they combined the first three books into an omnibus, which is this guy, which is very fat, as you can see. And the sales were not very good, and so when I presented them this space opera, my agent was a little like, I don't know if we can sell space opera. And my editor was like, I really love this, but you're switching genres, your sales haven't been that great, you have to change your name. If you want this contract, you have to change your name. And I was not very happy about that. I didn't want to change my name for obvious reasons. I didn't want to have to maintain two author personas, you know, all that sort of stuff. But I wanted the contract, and I really believed in the book. So I signed it. I've been pretty much regretting agreeing to change my name ever since. It has caused no end of... It's been nothing but a pain. I don't think it's helped my sales. I think it's hurt my sales. So that is one instance where I did not agree with the publisher's decision. But when you're traditionally published, you have very little power. And that's one of the big reasons I decided to try self-publishing, because I got real tired of basically being, you know, there's 1,000 other girls who want your job kind of thing. Feeling very replaceable. And to be clear, I do love my publisher, but decisions like this, when you have so little power, can feel very forced. And so that's kind of one of the darker sides. On the lighter side, though, there is, even though my sales were kind of low at the beginning of my career, I was able to get into any convention I wanted to within, you know, other than like Dragon Con. So there's a lot of good things that come with it too. You get a lot of kind of instant fame, which you may or may not actually deserve. But so it's a mixed bag.
That's actually a perfect lead-in for your entry into self-publishing. Did you find that your traditional background, and even if your sales started out kind of low, whether your fan base kind of followed you into the self-publishing end of it? Did you find that to be helpful?
Oh, I have the most amazing fan base that has ever been. My fans are just the absolute best. I love them all so much. And they followed me through a name change. They followed me to sci-fi. My sci-fi people went and found my Eli Monpress books despite the name differentiation. And they've come to Nice Dragons beautifully. Like, my fans just followed me, and I think a big part of that has been I have a really good website that ties everything together. And I didn't try to make a separate persona for Rachel Bach. I just said Rachel Aaron /Bach. And I think that really helped keep stuff together, which was a huge boon when I went to self-pub, because a lot of people who read my stuff said, oh, Rachel Aaron has a new one. Oh, isn't she Rachel Bach? I'll try it. And I had a lot of my fans who were saying, oh, you should read this book. And they're like, who is this lady? And they're like, it's the same lady who wrote Fortune's Pawn. Give it a try. And so that really did. And I, especially at the beginning when the book first came out, it was all my fans that gave me the initial boost. They got me up in the rankings. And then the Amazon algorithms came and scooped me up. And Nice Dragons has actually been in the top 1,000 on Amazon, on Kindle, for pretty much since the first, 10 days that it came out. It's been out for 63 days now. It's only now just starting to slide back.
So now Did you try to do anything that might have eased that transition from trad published into self-publishing? Did you try to do any strategies that might have moved fans over other than your, like other than your website?
Not really. I announced that I had a new book out on Twitter. I started a mailing list and got people signed up and let them know. But mostly, I think fans don't actually pay that much attention to who publishes a book. When I said I have a new book out, that was enough for them. They didn't ask, oh, well, who's publishing it? They and thank you very much to everyone who bought it. I love you all. It was actually a lot easier than I was expecting. We forget that the general reader doesn't care a great deal about self-publishing or trad publishing or small press publishing, so long as the end product looks pretty and reads well.
Yeah, that's so true. So, Rachel, what was your big decision with moving over to self-publishing? Because I mean, it sounds like you had some pretty good success with the traditional route. So, what kind of pushed you that way?
Oh well, it was a two-pronged effort, really. I definitely wanted. I'm a person who really likes to experiment. I like data. I like numbers. I like to try new things. And I'd done traditional publishing, and I kind of knew what I was in for. But I had a lot of friends who were self-publishing, and they're like, "It's really awesome. You get to make all these decisions yourself. You get to pick all your own titles and everything." And they were also talking about, and the money is just so much better on the self-pub side of things, like ridiculously better. And so I was like, well, why not? Things are changing so quickly. It would be ridiculous not to at least try it. And I had this book, which I really liked, which was Nice Dragons, but it was very strange. It didn't fit into any genre, and I've always had that problem with traditional publishing. I don't fit into the genres. I'm not, like Fortune's Pawn is military science fiction with romance that reads like urban fantasy. What shelf does that go on? And Eli was this very lighthearted kind of throwback to the 90s character-driven fantasy that got kind of dark and read sort of YA, but all the characters were older and dealing with very adult subject matter. And I don't mean that in the sexy way, I mean that in the serious, weighty issues that adults have to deal with in big decisions. So I don't fit, and Nice Dragons is probably the least fitting book into a genre of anything I've ever written. So I was like, if I'm going to try, this is a great one to try on. And so I just went for it, because I'm a pretty fast writer, as the 2K to 10K would show. So I wasn't like, if it messed up, it wouldn't be too much time loss. This is not like a novel decades in the making or anything. But so it was really a two-pronged sort of lure in that I wanted to experiment, I wanted to get more data, and I also wanted to see if I could make more money, because I was on the low end of traditional publishing, and Orbit does pay. Orbit, and this is not to say anything about Orbit, they pay lovely advances. I think actually are very fair in their compensation. They're, not paying me pennies or anything, but I wanted to give it a try, and so far it's actually been a success beyond my wildest dreams, which is kind of awesome.
That is awesome. That was a good segue, too, because you did throw in the 2K, 10K book. I think Carl's got some questions there for you. I know, I'll tell you this much. Carl turned me on to that book first time, and it's awesome. Like you say, it's a little book that could, but if any of our listeners out there have not read it and you want to write faster, more prolific, you should pick up a copy. Little plug there for you. But Carl, go ahead and.
Well, if I can interject something first here.
Yeah, sure. Go
Rachel, there's like a ton of comments on the website all asking about the book. That's like the book that everybody wants to hear about. I first actually heard about it from the self-publishing podcast probably about 2 years ago, I think, or a year ago, or whenever they first started. They were plugging the book, and I picked it up there, and then I was kind of halfway already doing what you suggested, but it really kind of opened my eyes to ways to do it better.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big secret of 2K to 10K. is that it is so simple. And when I kind of figured it out, I was like, this is so dumb. Everyone must already know this. And I just randomly talked about it at Con Carolinas, like 2012. I just mentioned that, oh, hey, I am suddenly writing 10K a day because I figured this out. And people acted like I cured cancer. And I felt kind of like I cured cancer. And then my friend John Hartness, who's a really awesome dude, was like, you should write an ebook about it. And I'm like, nah, no one wants to read this stuff. What do I know? And then I didn't do it for a while, and the 2K 10K blog post I wrote got bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, I'm like, okay, I'll write an ebook. And people loved it. People really did. Because I think one of the different things that I do is I try to write very practical advice because, as I said, I'm a data girl. I'm very practical. I don't really like to wax poetic on the subject of writing. And I think that a nuts and bolts writing guide has been very appreciated, especially a small, cheap one that just kind of gets the point.
Yeah, I think when I read it, people often mistake typing fast and writing fast, thinking it's the same thing. It's
yeah,
not.
I don't
Like
understand that.
I've been able to type extremely fast since I was about 7 years old. I've always been on computers. That didn't necessarily mean anything when I started writing because I could type really fast, but if I had nothing to write, nothing would come out. And even though it is just very practical, and I kind of just hit myself in the head when I read it and was like, of course, if you know what you're going to write in advance, and you talk a lot about outlining and just organizing yourself and being more, what's the word, just more streamlined in what you're doing. It really does do what it says in the title. It might not be 10K, but it's a hell of a lot more than it was before. It did start as a bunch of blog posts.
People report that they doubled.
Yeah,
people
I
mostly
would say
say
I
that they
doubled.
doubled their writing output. And some people actually go way higher. I've had people say, I got a 17,000 word day, and I want to be like, how? How did you do this? The highest I've ever hit is 15. Yeah.
For those who haven't read the book yet, Rachel, could you give kind of like a little bullet point about what the book is about?
Yes, I should probably do that. So 2K to 10K is my writing book, which is primarily about the method of how I went from writing 2,000 words a day to writing 10,000 words a day without increasing the time I spent writing. And that sounds kind of like magic or diet pills, but it's actually really easy, and it basically breaks down to 3 parts. The first one I discovered by accident, which is when I say it, it's going to sound like the most obvious thing ever, but here we go, is that knowing what you're writing before you write it will make you write faster. Like if you remember when you were in high school and they made you outline your essays, well, you can do that for your fiction writing. Instead of just sitting down, and I'm not talking about like a plot outline or something you do when you're plotting the book. I mean, when you sit down to write for however long you write, your 2 hours or whatever you have put aside, instead of just starting typing, you get out a notebook and you just say, this is what I'm going to write about today. This is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. And you just sort of make a very brief outline of the stuff you're going to write. And you can do it by scene, or you can do it by, I have 20 minutes to write, this is what I'm writing. And just the act of putting it down will help you figure out where the story's going wrong. Because a lot of the time that we lose in writing is figuring out where should the story go. Is this the right thing to say? Is this character in character? Is this the right direction? And a lot of us writers, we do that in the text, which is the place to do it because it's where you're spending the most time, where you're thinking about, is this the right word? You're basically doing one of the most time-intensive parts of writing inside the other most time-intensive part of writing and doubling all of these. So every time you have to erase a paragraph, well, that's 20 minutes lost. But if you just work it out ahead of time and just figure out what's going on, it enables you to actually move through the writing part of things much more quickly because all you're trying to figure out is how best to say what you already know what you're going to say. And just that simple step alone will double your word count, almost guaranteed. And that's kind of the big aha moment of 2K to 10K. Know what you're going to write before you write it. And I told you it was kind of silly. but it's true.
Now, first,
The
I want to
other,
say congratulations on getting to 10K a day. The question I have is, how much of the 10K do you find ends up making it to like the final draft? Like what percentage would you say?
well, that actually is very, very difficult to say. I tend to keep, when I write a scene that works, I tend not to throw a lot of it away. In fact, actually, often the faster and more excited I am, the faster I'm writing and the more excited I am about the scene, the better the writing itself is, because I know exactly what I'm doing. I get it down right the first time, and everything is amazing. The scenes that I tend to have problems with, or I'm not actually sure where I'm going, and that's not because the method isn't working, it's because I, the writer, have not yet made up my mind if this is the correct way to go. And those parts tend to get cut a lot because even though I wrote everything down, in my plan that I wrote down, I was still meandering, but I didn't know until I went and looked back, and hindsight being 2020, I figured out what I did wrong. So you can't stop yourself from making mistakes. That's just a natural part of writing. You're going to get stuff wrong. But in terms of like, how many words do you throw away? Well, I'm not writing crap. I'm sitting here. I mean, that would be ridiculous if writing 10K words a day and I threw away 5. That would be utterly worthless. I might as well take like the extra time and get all 5K right. But that's not how it works at all. Like the day I got 15K was actually the very end of Heaven's Queen, which is the third of my Debbie Morris sci-fi series. And I've been waiting to get to this climax, like the whole series. I was so excited to write it. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew exactly what everyone was going to say. I was so pumped. And I just sat down one day and I just wrote the whole thing. And that part of the book went all the way to publication with very minor changes. I think I edited like spelling and word choice. Otherwise, it was entirely unchanged. And other parts of my books that I wrote fairly quickly, I've completely redone 4 and 5 times just because I changed my mind on the best way to tell the story. So it's not really a number you can pin down like that.
Well, it's great that a lot of the time you have, 10,000 usable words as long as you have made the decisions beforehand. Another nuts and bolts question I have for you. Do you tend to have like coffee or tea before you start writing? Do you listen to stuff? Do you listen to like instrumental music or music with lyrics? Do you notice like a difference in output in addition to knowing what you're going to write beforehand with those other things, or does it just come out naturally as long as you have it thought out beforehand?
Well, I drink coffee in the morning, but otherwise I don't really drink any. I drink water, obviously. But I used to drink a ton of Diet Coke, but I had to cut down. I was a Diet Coke fueled writer, but I eventually had to cut down. But no, I can write with or without drinks, and I actually do not like music of any sort when I'm writing. I find it very distracting. I actually really like white noise, like if I'm in a coffee shop or something, and the noise of people behind me, that's really nice. I also have like a fan at home that I use just to kind of make me zone out so I can write. But the second part of 2K10K actually is to figure out what time of day is best for you. As I said, there's like 3 parts to writing fast. One is knowing what you're going to write before you write it. But the second one is knowing what time is best for you to write. And for me, that was the afternoon. And what I did was I actually on how many words I wrote at these different times a day, and then I kind of averaged them over a week. And I saw that I wrote significantly more words in the afternoon, which was news to me because I would have bet money I was a morning writer. But it was very clear that my words per hour were much higher in the afternoon, and that was because at the time I was writing in the afternoons at a coffee shop where I didn't have internet and no one was bothering me, and I could just sit down and write for 4 hours uninterrupted, and that was the magic key to writing ridiculous numbers of words. I mean, I had like stupidly productive 2,500 words an hour sessions doing that, and so I think it's less of what you have around you so much as the quality of your writing time. Like, you got to figure out when is your best quality writing time, when are you most aware, when is the atmosphere correct. And also another big thing that I think a lot of writers discount is how much uninterrupted time you have. Because I know, at least for me, I have about a 30-minute dive-in period where I have to kind of ramp up and get back into the story and figure out what's going on. And every time I get significantly interrupted, like I have to stop and answer an email, I have to redo that 30-minute dive-in period where my words per hour are very low. So I'm trying to remember where I was. So if you can get uninterrupted writing time, that is just gold. That'll shoot your words per hour up.
Okay, if we could back up a little bit, Rachel, because you kind of broke up in the very beginning there, and I know there's some people on the website that were really wanting to hear this. When you were going back, you were literally tracking when you were writing and how many words per hour. Is that correct? You were putting them on a spreadsheet and keeping track of your production during certain times of the day.
Oh yes. I actually had a spreadsheet where every time I sat down to write, I wrote down where I was, how many words I wrote, and how many words per hour I wrote, and how long I wrote. And I organized these. I did this really, it wasn't a spreadsheet, but I put it all in the table. And at the end of the month, it was a very clear picture of my writing habits. And of course, I'm a full-time writer, so I had a lot of entries. But even if you only have hours in your day to write, trying them at different times of the day and recording your progress over a long period of time, so you know it's not, well, this part of the book was easier. You can see where your best writing periods of the day are and use your time more effectively. Because it would be a real shame if you thought you were a night writer and it turns out you're actually an early morning writer and you just didn't know.
Okay, so one thing I would like to point out to everyone on the website is that we got her to say spreadsheets several times, so you're welcome.
Spreadsheets are my favorite thing.
One follow-up I had. You said you wrote 2,500 words an hour sometimes. Do you write like for an hour and then take like a 5-minute break, or what's your process? Do you write 3 hours straight, or?
It really depends on what I'm writing. If I get in the zone, I will not move. I will sit in a chair for 3 hours, and my body hates me, and it's a terrible way to be, but I love it. I don't even notice the passage of time. If I'm having trouble, I like to get up and walk around and kind of talk myself through the scene, which can be a little strange if you're writing in public places, but I find that helps. I definitely recommend getting up and stretching because you can severely hurt your hands or your back or whatever if you're in a position for a very long time. But my kind of rule of thumb is if it hurts, stop doing it. If typing is hurting, just lay off for a little bit. Don't take a 5-minute break and go back. Just stop. You know, talk about the book, but just stop typing so that your hands can rest. Because when the pain happens, that's your warning sign, and you need to just quit.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, you mentioned when you were at a coffee shop and you didn't have internet, you got really productive. I've known a lot of writers that they get internet blocking software and have
Yeah, I
reported.
have Freedom now.
Do you want to talk about what a huge difference it makes to block the internet in terms of productivity?
Oh, smartphones, the internet, these are your enemy as a writer because, you know, especially because when the writing is good, it doesn't matter. You're like, yay, but if you're having a hard time, if a scene isn't working, it's so easy to just get distracted. Oh, an email came in. I would highly recommend just turning off the internet. I use Freedom, which is a $10 program, and it just turns off everything. And I can't actually recommend it because it's very, very buggy, but it's about the only one I can find for PC. So if you're a programmer and you want my money, please write freedom that doesn't suck.
Yeah, I started using Freedom for Mac about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or something, and that fixed a lot of problems, a hell of a lot of
It
problems.
does. But I would also
It
say,
was,
kind of going back to the when you're distracted thing, the third side of the triangle for 2K to 10K, we talk about the three things, in addition to knowing when it's best to write and knowing what you're going to write before you write it, is actually enthusiasm. And one of the things I've noticed is that when I'm distracted, when I'm very distractible, all the stuff I turn off the internet for, it's because I'm not actually very excited about what I'm writing. And that's actually a big red flag. If you're not excited about what you're writing, then no one else is going to be. And so if you find yourself getting distracted by the internet, which you should have turned off, being able to stop your writing and say, okay, what's wrong? Why would I rather read a webcomic than write my book that I supposedly love? What's wrong with the scene? What's not going right? And just by noticing when your own attention is flagging, you can make your book so much better. And you can greatly increase your writing speed because you write faster when you're writing stuff you care about and you really love. And if there's a scene this is taking for freaking ever, it might be because the scene does not belong in your book and you need to cut it. And
well,
if you put all these three things together, you'll be a writing powerhouse.
while on that specific subject, one of our regular viewers, Zoe York, she's not feeling well, but she emailed me basically just saying what you've said. She said the problem is sometimes writers as we are just get to the point where we're maybe a little bit bored or frustrated with our book in general, and how do we know the difference between it being a problem and it's a boring scene or something that maybe we shouldn't be writing, or just the general I'm being a writer and I hate everything in the world right now. She wanted to know if you had any tips to know the difference.
Well, I go back and forth between I hate myself, I hate my books, I hate everything, I'm going to lie on the floor and be a worm, and being, oh my god, I'm the best writer ever, I'm amazing, like multiple times a day. It's very fast cycling. And I think that's just a natural part of being a creative person. Sometimes you have really great ideas and you feel on top of the world, and sometimes you're like, my ideas are terrible. And you can't really trust either of those voices because we are historically our own worst judges. But at the same time, the difference between an idea that's bad and an idea you're just down on because you're not having a good day is the idea that's bad will be easily forgotten. You know, if you just let it go and move on and you don't remember it, it's actually probably a terrible idea. But if that idea sticks with you, even if you're really frustrated, you just like, oh, I really like that idea. I want it to work so bad. Then it's an idea that's worth your blood, sweat, and tears because it's an idea that's going to stick around. And one of my favorite things about writing was actually Ira Glass wrote this thing about taste and about how the key to being a good writer is having good taste. And everything else can be practiced and everything else can be learned and gained. But your good taste is the thing that really makes you a good writer. You know what's good, and sometimes your skills may not be up to your taste level. And you read this and you go, this is crap, this is bad. And that's really good that you know that because it shows your taste level. And sometimes it can be just depression, in which case you need to put it down, walk away, pet your dog, cheer up, pet your cat. But other times it might well be bad, but the fact that you know it's bad is a good mark for you, and that means you can fix it. Or know something is bad and think, how can I fix it? Then be like, I have a weird feeling about this and I'm not sure. So, yeah, I would say trust your instincts, and if you can walk away and it sticks with you, that means it's good. You should go for it.
And I would also interject and say that every writer has bad days. Every writer has days where you can't tell if what you're writing is pure crap or not. You don't want to ever, ever, ever delete what you're working on until you've gotten away and you've gotten some distance from it. Never delete it just because you think it's bad.
I've actually never deleted anything I have written. I have massive cuts files. I just keep a cut file, and if I don't like it, I just cut it and paste it into the thing. And 99% sure I'll never look at it again, but you never delete it. Because that way you can always go back.
Yeah, and most of the time what you'll end up finding is that you get some distance from it, you get in a little bit better mood, and you read it again, and you'll know whether it works or whether it doesn't. At that point, you've got the distance, you can tell.
I've opened books I've trunked. I have a lot of trunked books. I'm very, very bad about starting books, getting really, really into books, and then there's a giant unfixable problem. And I'm like, I would rather just move on than fix this problem. So I just trunk it and move on. But I've gone back and I feel like, this book was so good. Why did I trunk this? I didn't actually resurrect any of those. So maybe that's a bad example.
So you're saying you don't just hit publish after you're done with the first draft? You edit and stuff too?
No. One of my favorite game creators is Blizzard. And
mine too.
Oh, I love Blizzard. I played so much World of Warcraft. I had to quit because I couldn't play it responsibly.
Me too. I nearly. Yeah.
But Blizzard as a company has a policy of it's done when it's done. If it's not good, it's not done. And that's my policy. If something doesn't pass, if I am not 100% proud of the book, if I don't feel this was the absolute best I could have done, I don't send it out. I don't publish it because there's nothing worse, really, than a writer putting out sloppy work. It's disrespectful of your fans. It's disrespectful of things. So we as writers, especially in self-publishing, because we're all we have to have a quality standard for our own work. And we have to put out things that, because we're asking people to pay money for something. And you wouldn't want to ask someone to, I mean, if you had to pay money for something and it was full of bugs, you'd be very angry. And percent proud of. We're not 100% behind. And that's sort of I feel that my personal brand is one of great quality. And I try to maintain that in everything that I do. So no fast publish, no hidden publish for me.
And anyone who knows me, especially the people on the show, now know why I was so keen to have Rachel on, because she thinks exactly the same as I do, and she loves Blizzard the same. Who doesn't love Blizzard? Before we get on to a discussion about...
Blizzard, you're lying.
Yeah, exactly. Before we get on to having a quick chat about Kindle Unlimited, because I know you've recently found some success there, what's your favorite Blizzard game other than World of Warcraft?
Right now, we're actually playing a lot of Diablo 2. They just patched it, and it's really, really, really fun.
Have you played any Hearthstone at all?
No, I haven't. I only play games I can play with my husband. I don't play the single-player games. Because my only gaming time I have is like time I spend with him, so we tend to game together. And if we can't game together, we generally don't play it. But it looks really fun.
I won't tell you because it is ultra addictive. I think it's even worse than WoW for me. I had to actually delete it from my Mac. But if you had 2 Battle.net accounts and 2 computers, then you can play direct head-to-head Hearthstone games against your husband.
That's not good for our marriage because I'm a very bad loser, and he's very good at everything, video game-wise. We don't play versus each other. That was almost a breakup. We played chess on our honeymoon, and he beat me in like 3 moves, and I don't think I spoke to him for the rest of the day. So bad.
All right.
Don't do that.
Kev?
Hey, Rachel, we have a question on the website pertaining to your outlining process. They're wondering how detailed your outline of the book is prior to you actually starting the writing. Do you do a major outline on it, or do you do a light one?
Oh, I'm a plotter through and through. I do major outlining, and it does vary from book to book. Some books I get really hyper detailed because they're very complex. Other books I'm just like, oh, well, in this scene, X happens, and then X happens, and that's the end of it. But I always like to do a chapter-by-chapter outline. I like to do a preferably scene by scene outline. I like to go ahead and mark out where chapters begin and end. I actually now have a spreadsheet for plotting. I told you I like them. Where I do individual cells for scenes so that I can move them around and color code everything very easily. And I just like it. I like seeing everything in a nice, neat little line. But yes, I plot everything. But again, though, I feel this is very personal to each writer. I think if you have an outline and you know where you're going, then it works. You don't have to do any outline by any specific way. Just write it down so you know what you're saying, because the only person who's ever going to see this is you. So if it works for you, then it's fine. But I do highly recommend it. I do highly recommend knowing how your book's going to end before you finish it, and knowing where you're going. Because if you don't know where you're going in the middle of your book, that can be very bad and require a lot of rewriting, which will slow you down enormously.
That's the biggest thing I picked up, I think, from 2 to 10K. I didn't have a problem with beginnings and ends of books. I always knew how they began, and I could write, and end. It was that middle period that I always kind of just gave up.
Well, I have yet to meet an author who likes middles.
Yeah,
although what I do is I figure out, when I have a new book, I start out by kind of writing down everything I know about the book. I just write it all. Like if I know anything I want in the book, I just kind of dump it all out. And then I start kind of working on who's in the book, who's important, what happens, what are the major events, what's this book about, the thrust of the action, is there going to be a sequel, what's the kind of the meta plot of the larger story, that sort of stuff, just the things you need to know where you're going. And then I kind of figure out, okay, the book starts here, and then I figure out where the book ends. And then I just start saying, okay, well, what happens next? And I start at the beginning, I'm like, what happens then, what happens then? And when I get to a point I don't know, I jump to the end. And I say, well, how did we get here? Well, how did we get here? And I go until I don't know. And then I sort of go back and I just figure it out point by point until I've got all the points in the line. And that really works for me. But again, I'm a very linear person. It may not work for you, but I like it.
Do you have any brainstorming techniques that you found really useful? That's another question from the website, whether you use any brainstorming software or brainstorming groups, or do you do anything like that?
I have a brainstorming husband. I highly recommend talking out your story. Trying to explain what your story is about to someone who is going to question your ideas is a invaluable tool. It's insanely frustrating because he's going to ask really stupid questions that should be obvious, but they're not because he's not you, or the person you're talking to is not you, and it's going to make you re-examine your ideas from the light of an outsider, which is one of the best things you can do. And I've found that just saying, hey, I want to write a book about this, to someone who's like, okay, well, what about this and this and this, and what if this happens? And if you really have wizards and they're all going to this school that's invisible in Scotland, why don't they have technology? Surely someone brought a phone, you know, that kind of thing. It drove me crazy. Why did no one have word processors at Hogwarts? Why? Why are they writing stuff longhand? Drove me insane.
I think
I found that's invaluable.
I think we should get to the Kindle Unlimited a little bit. We're running up on an hour already, and I know there were some questions hanging about that because you kind of teased that you had a little success.
Yeah. I have numbers.
Oh boy, you just made our nerds, the data nerds on the website are just probably salivating right now.
I just want to point out, if you're a hard liquor fan, you should rewatch this episode, and anytime there's a spreadsheet mention, have like 4 shots.
And anytime Romance Stevers is mentioned, oh, I just did, you have to drink. Hi, Romance Stevers.
So anyway, on to the Kindle Unlimited apocalypse. It seems like you are not in the pants-pooping pitchfork camp. So what has your experience been?
Well, first, I would like to say that of all the parts of self-publishing that I've experienced, my favorite have been the numbers. Because when you're in traditional publishing, you don't really ever know how much you sold where. You 6 months, which are 6 months behind when you earned them. And you'll see like audiobooks sold, but it doesn't say were they sold through Audible, were they sold through this other thing. Actually, sorry, I take it back. I don't even see I don't even see audiobooks sold. I see the amount of money I made from audiobooks that were sold with no, you sold X number, and I'm like, well, okay. And you don't see, you'll see, you sold 1,000 ebooks, but it doesn't say Amazon ebooks. Were they on Kobo? Were they at Barnes & Noble? You don't know anything. You know nothing. And that used to frustrate me so much, again, because I'm such a numbers person. But in self-publishing, I have all the numbers I could ever want, and I roll in them on a regular basis. I love it. We make little graphs and metrics. My husband actually programmed, he's a programmer, programmed a website called KDP Plus, which is actually part of my website. You go to rachelaaron.net/KDP Plus, I believe it is. That has a way for you to download your Kindle spreadsheets, the ones that Amazon gives you, and generate beautiful Google graphs that will tell you like how many books you sold in your lifetime, which Amazon doesn't tell you, which I can't understand. Kindle Unlimited. Basically, my book came out on the 15th of July. And this was right before Kindle Unlimited. Like, they announced it, I think, maybe a week into my book being out. And I did the numbers with my husband, again, numbers. And we kind of figured out that we're pretty sure Kindle Unlimited is going to make Amazon a stupid amount of money. And which means that they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, basically. The authors who are in the program are the part of what makes the program successful. And if Amazon is making a stupid amount of money, they're not going to cut Kindle Unlimited borrow rates, was kind of my logic behind it. And I had a blog post about that, and it's on my blog, which you can get off my website, which is rachelaaron.net. Just scroll down until you see KU, and how it's going to make us all a lot of money. But I didn't really consider going into it myself because I didn't want the exclusivity. I wanted everything to be open. And so my book's trucking along, and it's doing really well. And then I hit the 30-day cliff, which is a very real thing, I discovered. And I start to kind of panic because I'd gotten really used to doing very well, and now I was flipping. I'm like, and I look at the books I was selling on Barnes & Noble and Kobo, which are my other two vendors, and I'm like, I'm only selling 2 to 3 books a day on these vendors versus the hundreds of books, the 100 or so books a day I was selling on Amazon. And I'm like, assuming a Kindle borrow rate of $2, which I was assuming at the time, ha ha ha, foolish me, I'd only have to have I think it was 10 borrows to make more money than I was making on Kobo and Barnes & Noble. And also, the borrows would count as sales, or when people click to borrow the book, it counts as a sale towards your Amazon rank, which would keep me up in the rankings. And that's really important because you have more eyeballs. And so people who will buy your book, who are not part of Kindle Unlimited, will see your book more often, which is really important to generating sales. So I was like, what have I got to lose? I'm only 3 books a day, So I switched over. And I'm now getting something like, it shot my sales rank right back up. Actually, even I went from hovering around the 600s to hovering in the 400s for nearly 3 weeks, which was amazing. And in the second 30 days my book was out, so days 31 to 60, I actually sold 435 more units than I had in my first 30 days, which was before I joined Kindle Unlimited. So it was not cannibalizing my sales. It was actually improving my sales by 435 units, and it vastly improved my rank. Plus, I was having my borrows and my sales were actually about the same. So I was reaching a much larger audience. I was reaching this enormous audience that I never could have reached before. that of people who were borrowing my book because it looked free to them. And that's a really great thing to have in a first book because, you know, series are a pyramid, and your later books are always going to sell worse than your first book just because of the nature of people read the first book and then maybe they continue and maybe they don't. So the broader you can make the base of your pyramid, the taller your entire series will be, is kind of the thinking. And so the way I look at it is I didn't look at KU numbers as lost sales. I looked at them as a different sort of sale that still gave me rank and still earned me money and still got me in front of readers and helped me sell other books. It was sort of like training wheels on my other sales. And it really, really helped me. And even now that the borrow rate has dropped to, I think it was $1.54, $1.53 for August, I've made $5,400 off Kindle Unlimited that I would not have made on Barnes & Noble and Kobo at the rates I was going. So, I mean, that's not chicken scratch. That's real money. And so for me, Kindle Unlimited has been has been the right financial choice. And I have gotten angry emails from readers who say, why can't I buy your book on Barnes & Noble and Kobo? Why can't I do this? And to those people, I just say, I'm so sorry, here's a free copy. It costs me nothing to send them a free copy. And then they get super happy, and they go tell all their friends, oh, Rachel Aaron's the best person ever, you should go buy her book. And then they do, and it's fantastic. So then it's no skin off my nose. That's sort of my thinking on Kindle Unlimited. And even if the borrow rates do continue to drop, which I very much hope they will not, but even if they do, at least for me, my sales on other vendors were so far below the money that I'm making from essentially having a free book that's not actually free, still make Kindle Unlimited very worth it for me. And so I have not seen any sales cannibalization. I'm making more money. My Amazon rank's still up. Yeah, I'm sold. Kindle Unlimited forever. Woo!
I'd actually like to tack onto that too, because I'm with Montlake Amazon Publishing, so my books are automatically in Kindle Unlimited, and I've noticed the same thing. There's been no cannibalization of sales. Sales have not actually gone down, but the borrows have gone so far up that it's pushed the ranks way back up. And let's see, it's been 7 months since the last book released, and the rank right now is like 2,000 or 3,000 better than it was before Unlimited started, just because of the borrows.
No, go ahead. I'm just agreeing with you. I think you are entirely right. Hugh Howey actually just wrote a post about Kindle Unlimited that I think is very, very interesting, and I really, really liked. But what he was basically saying, you know, because one of the big things people hate on Kindle Unlimited is the exclusivity, which I agree does kind of suck. I really developed this kind of rebel, you're not going to tell me what to do thing now that I've gone indie, kind of getting rebellious here. But at the same time, I really disliked publishing, and this is just my personal opinion, and nothing for these, I'm sure, fine companies, but I really disliked publishing on Kobo and Barnes & Noble as a user, as like the self-published author customer. I had difficulty getting the files when they were uploaded. I wasn't in categories. It was very difficult for people to find my books if they didn't know exactly the name. And my sales ranks were terrible. I didn't have any, whereas on Amazon, I was literally doing nothing, and the algorithms were picking me up and lifting me away. So as a self-published author consumer of their product, which is a publishing service, I was not happy with the other options available. And so I went with the product that I thought was best, which is what consumers do, which was Amazon. And I don't actually consider myself an Amazon fangirl or an Amazon cheerleader or anything like that. I just like them as a company because they do what I need them to do. They are functional. They are helpful. They are succeeding as a company in selling me the product that I want, which is successful publishing. And I feel that it's kind of the point of capitalism to reward people who do it right and not reward people who do it wrong. to encourage them to stop doing it wrong and maybe be better.
So there you go. Do we have any more questions on Kindle Unlimited or anything else to add from you guys? I did share a blog post that I wrote asking for our SPRT viewers to weigh in with their thoughts on Kindle Unlimited yesterday, and I put that in the chat below.
Yeah, I have been reading K-boards where people do report sales cannibalization. So I would like to stress that I can only speak for my books. If your book's being cannibalized, and then I fully admit that your experience is different. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just that's not been my experience. And we all kind of do things. Every book's different. Every book kind of acts a little differently. But I have not experienced it.
Well, I think it also really depends on what your sales are like at the other distributors. I mean, if your sales on the other platforms are, a good percentage, you're not going to want to lose those customers. But if you aren't making anything at those platforms, then it might be something to look into.
Oh yeah, like if I had been making, if Barnes & Noble and Krobo had been like 10% of my sales or 20%, I would never have done this. But they were, I think, let's see, yeah, they were like less than 5%. So I was like,
Yeah. It's all by percentages. We'll say spreadsheets one more time for those data nerds on the website.
Yeah,
there goes the vodka again. God.
I think for the nerds, we should point out they do a lot of spreadsheets on Romance Divas.
They do a lot of spreadsheets on Romance Divas. That's romancedivas.com.
And spreadsheet.
I'm going to be posting actually my numbers from my sales, like the actual sales numbers that I've gotten, when I can find some time to post to my blog, because I'm actually really, really busy writing a book right now. But I have numbers, and I am going to post them. And this is because, again, one of my favorite parts about self-publishing is just the numbers, but the transparency. How many people have put their numbers up? Like, I could not have made my decision to self-publish if other self-published authors before me had not shared their numbers. And I'm a huge believer in paying it forward. And so I'm going to post my numbers when I actually get time to make the table and make them all pretty. But I'm not holding out, so I'm not going to do it. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But so far, self-publishing for me has been very exciting. Another thing I wanted to point out before we quit was I think the single best thing I did for my self-published novel, besides giving it a very nice cover and a nice blurb, which are kind of the most important things. Good cover, good blurb, good beginning pages, and you've got a sale. But the other thing I did was at the end of the book, I put a back matter page asking people to leave a review. And I got this tip from Courtney Milan, who I'm pretty sure is a genius. And it's literally just a page that says, "Hey, I'm glad you read my book. Thank you. Would you please leave a review? Good or bad. Reviews are great for authors." Something kind of like that. And that one page dramatically increased my reviews over my traditionally published books. And in terms of like sales per review, The Legend of Eli Monpress, we had worked out the math, and it had sold about 350 copies per one review on Amazon, versus Nice Dragons Finished Last, which sells 60 copies per one review. So even though Eli has sold more, Nice Dragons Finished Last already has far more Eli. If you're looking for reviews, it's putting a little page in the back. Does it wonders.
I think we're freezing up a little bit.
Yeah, I think they caught the tip, though, right? Put the page in the back, tell them what to do. Good CTAs. We've had other authors talk about that. A little pitch to Courtney Milan and all that. So, but yes, it was a little frozen there, but I think we got it.
Oh, good. Well, that was basically it. Is that the thing in the back of the book gave me an enormous advantage for reviews over my traditionally published books, which was the kind of the point I was getting to. Is that one page made an enormous difference. So if you do one thing different, put that page in the back.
I'd say, Rachel, it's got some good advice. You better listen.
That's
Now wait,
correct.
froze. I think we ought to call it a night because
Yeah, I was
Google's
gonna say.
Google's
Google's
turning
playing
bitchy
that.
on us.
I was gonna say, Kev, are we running one
Turning
of our?
into
Are we
Yep.
gonna run one of our after parties?
If you wanna be in the after party and talk about pants pooping and the Kindle apocalypse and pitchforks, just let us know in the comments, and I will send you out an invite.
Yeah, I think. Well, there's a bunch of people that have been watching live, so hopefully you've all enjoyed the show. And if you could be so kind as to consider leaving us a review on iTunes or subscribing to our channel on YouTube, I would very much appreciate that, and so would everyone else on the show.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Rachel, for coming on. It was great information, and thank you for being so transparent and sharing things. I'm looking forward to that blog post with your numbers. So.
well, it's the perestroika here, the new transparency. So hopefully it'll end better for me than it did for Soviet Russia.
And I know I knew that Trish would like you because as soon as you said transparency, I know that's one of Trish's big things. So
Yeah, I'll be sharing the numbers when I start self-publishing my new series as well.
Awesome.
I find that transparency is good unless it involves wearing underwear, in which case.
and me too, because
Very
people
attractive.
coming out
I
big eyes.
would kind of prefer we don't go into the underwear discussion again. Kind of end with that far too often on this show.
It's for those romance divas. That's what it is.
Hey, go pick up 2K to 10K and
Yeah.
Nice Dragons
I
finish line.
noticed a bunch of people had already clicked the link on the post, so go and pick it up. It's a good deal.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
2K, 99 cents. It's
Just 99 cents.
$5 for $1.
The
Yeah,
bargain.
it'll be the best 99 cents you've paid. Trust me on that. I buy a lot of
Well,
books.
that is until they buy Pandora's Gate, Book 1, next Tuesday on Amazon.com.
Who's that
We'll
written
talk-
by again?
Yeah, we'll talk
That
about
was
that
written
later.
by a young, spunky-looking Australian author.
Spunky
fantasy
looking?
novel.
Did you just say
Yeah.
spunky looking?
Yeah,
Really?
Spunky. Yeah, he
I mean, it's
obviously
hot.
does not.
I don't know about your filthy American ways, but in
yeah.
Australia, this bearded chap is coming out on Tuesday. I know you've all been hassling me for a long time, so go read it.
All right. All right, on that happy note, everybody be spunky.
And we'll see you next week with Robert Crane.
And say hi to your mums.